10 minutes. Anyway, good to see you again. Anyway, maybe we can do every day a little bit of meditation. Everybody loves to meditation. No, I always just, I talk, blah, 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 blah. You just listen, then sometimes and tomorrow you forgot. And we can do it sometimes. This time I went to India, holiness also mentioned for monasteries. I don't know, I think last year the holiness went to Sarah, one we call Geku in the discipline and the monks. He asked about holiness. Maybe usually the monks start to puja time, they just always chanting there, do meditation. Just, come down, Sarado, Gomjan, Sarado, Gomjan, San, come down the Numadas. Sit down, maybe tell us some the mother there, some of the time they come around, some are corner, Chagan, the Gomjan, they look so much. It's not that's also some of the time.
So in the monasteries, usually the monks, we do a lot of chantings. When we're chanting, of course, you're supposed to contemplate at the same time on the words that you chant. But there's no kind of tradition, of where you just sit there quietly without saying or chanting anything and just contemplate.
But then the Geku disciplinary ask about maybe we start to puja time, maybe 10 or 20 minutes. The monks also, not just only chanting, they do meditation. 3 principles. We usually
3 principles as well.
Yeah. Then holiness, so that's a good idea. Then this time holiness, he come to Saudi Arabia. Then he teach 3 days at the Thubten College. He mentioned that last year someone, asked about this, what do you think this? I thought that's a very good idea. And we also always not only chanting, sometimes do all together the meditation. This is good for everybody, or merit, or if we do it together, then also more power. Therefore, we can also do sometimes here, not for sleep. Therefore, first we have to set a perfect motivation, good motivation. Firstly, everybody can look all the statues, Buddhas, Avalokiteshvara, holiness, Dhammasambhava, just everybody was looking. Then close the moment you close eye, then can you remember what they look like, what they think about this exactly.
Not just like the portrait or statues, but like a real being there.
Look like
like a married field. So in the presence of these married field, then you should set up a proper motivation. So first you look at the statues or the picture, and then after that you close your eye and then imagine whatever you have seen earlier. Imagine that. Try to see the clear picture of the statues or the portraits.
Then also it's not necessary to think about the pictures of Buddhas. Whatever you like, that's also correct.
So any kind of Buddha, any kind of deities or Buddhas, that you are you have strong faith in, and so forth.
다 대가서 간다. 시당 다 공제도 만나서 샘나 그거다. 샘나 그거 답신다가 뭐보래. 샘나 그거 답신다고 그랬어.
So, when you are meditating, you try to bring your mind inwards, try to bring your mind into yourself, to letting it go out to different objects. So there are many different methods that you can use, to bring your mind in.
근데 다 뒤엔달라 소소야 되네. 아니, 다 심지어 탐지거든 그 상지 고마도 그래. 대체는 말한 거지. 간대 저거나 아니 주년 바이나 주로는 저거는 제 예산에 대체 심지어 탐지 체도 상지 고마도야 체도 대체 예산에 샘 뒤가 다랑 싸네. 아니 그만치 싸면 나왔어.
So now visualize, a merry field, or in Buddha, that you can feel comfortable with, and then set up proper motivation. Think that I must achieve state of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, just for the benefit of all sentient beings, and therefore I'm going to, listen to these teachings. So I'm going to engage in this practice and so forth. So set that motivation for a few seconds now.
too long today by possibly. And this Dachina doing Yelaya, Lenana should the desert to do that, and a local kid, Lumache, was.
Of course, all this, the posture of the seven posture of the Virachana and so forth should be preceded that before this setting up motivation. So maybe you already know about that and you're already in that posture. So.
And then you can know Chivala Tene and the Sanjay or Shanjo and the Susi Javit is over Sani. That's enough. And a red cover of the Sosoya. That one marsh and Susu Kangama Kane. Check the Waya watch. The Susu Dichi, Limas in Makio, Tawa Napo, Navachine, Martensama, and Subu Nakagachi, or Kabo Chani. That the Waya watch. And listen, there were Chapati, yes, almost a little Sami.
Then, so because you have generated this kind of motivation in the presence of the holy object that you have just visualized, and the holy object, whoever is Buddha or Avalokiteshvara or whoever it is very pleased with you and sends a white light, a blessing in the form of white light and nectar, enters into you through your crown, hole in the crown, and then enters in your body. The whole entire body is filled with the light. All the negativities, all the delusions, all the obstructions come out of your your body in the form of a black smoke and black liquid, and then your body is completely filled with white light, completely pure, and you experience a great bliss. So imagine that for a minute now. So that is the practice of flowing the nectars and purifying the negativities.
Okay. What is it? I mean, I can't get some down with it. Madushna, Nami Latati, Tano, some of the tango is in another data, collapse some of the was.
So we should always do this kind of practice. So this is what we've been, hearing, or what has been explained, but we don't put it in practice. We just listen and then just walk away, but don't really put it in practice.
Okay, everybody feel a little bit happy, blessing. Yeah, not much change. Anyway, that was
so it might not be easy at the beginning, because we're not used to it, but as we get more and more used to it, then it will become more and more, familiar, easier for us.
And it done also to go back, some
So what we really have to familiarize our mind with, is with the three principal aspects of the path: the renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. So one day we contemplate on renunciation, and one day we contemplate on bodhicitta, and then one day we contemplate on emptiness, and so progress day by day this way. So before you can contemplate on renunciation, first you have to know what is renunciation, how do you contemplate on it, and so forth. So you have to know about it first. So what is the renunciation? The renunciation is a mind, it's a thought, right? Wanting to achieve liberation. So liberation is to gain or to obtain freedom, right? So freedom from what? It's freedom from cycle existence. And so then you have to know, you have to think, why do I want to be free from cycle existence? What is the problem in cycle existence? And then you have to think about all the problems and all the sufferings in cycle existence. And so as you think, of all these problems, why I have to be free from cycle existence, because there's such and such problem, because there's such and such suffering and so forth. So you can't, you keep on thinking about all these different disadvantages of cycle existence, and that is called analytical meditation. And so in the cycle existence, there are three realms of existence. Six migratory beings. So wherever you are born, you're in cycle existence. So the six migratory beings, there are three lower migratory beings and three upper migratory beings. And do you know where we are born? As a human being, where are we born? In which category of the migratory beings we are born?
Higher realm.
The desire realm.
The desire realm.
So do we have suffering since we're in higher realm?
Yes.
So basically, we have these four main sufferings, right? The suffering of birth, suffering of aging, suffering of sickness, and suffering of death. So we have gone through the suffering of birth already, right? But we can see that on other people. Like when the child is born, it cries a lot, right? That's because there's a suffering. So there are so many sufferings, so many details about that suffering, the suffering of birth, what kind of sufferings you go through when you are born and so forth. But we don't have to go through all that details now. And then there is a suffering of sickness, right? So many diseases, so many different kinds of sicknesses that we can go through. So all these diseases or sicknesses that we experience is the suffering of sickness. So the sign that is suffering is that we listen to all the advices of the doctors or physicians 100%, right? So if we then those food that we enjoy so much, on a daily basis, if the doctor says that's not good, then for our health, and then we stop it right away, right?
Usually, I think that's just very, strict there. Tibetan usually doesn't care. They want their care, they want their healthy, they want to eat whatever they like. The Westerners, that's all this my diet, my diet, then all the delicious things we can just put up there, just eat some grass. It's very called grass, usually the vegetables, very delicious things. Then they just cook, maybe boil water. And most Western people, they like that. That's very healthy, good food. It's very called grass. Anyway, today that's susula kaji. Navi duma nyando mewa, navi duma hakko, navi duma nyamado, that trouble is
So because we don't want to experience those sufferings of the sickness, and therefore when we're advised not to eat such and such food, then we are able to stop it right away because we don't want to go through the suffering of sickness.
So, usually I like some really delicious momos. In Tibet they cook very delicious momo. Now I have tried a little bit less, but still I eat. Then that need give it to another. That give. Then chew it to my, that give it to my, chew it to my. Tango Shimani Gema, Genya Maruna Gendo. She never did that shiro, not the moment it was.
And then, of course, the suffering of aging, right? Getting older and older every day. Yeah. And so that's the suffering, and especially like when you're close to death, that age. And then, even if we don't want to experience that suffering of aging, we still keep on aging all the time, getting older and older all the time. And then even if we don't want to die, we still have to die eventually. And there's all these sufferings that we have to experience or go through at the time of death.
Right. You don't want to getting old, right? I like to younger than when catch the 20 years, then very fast. Yes, go very fast. They just when we was maybe 10, 12, 13 years, then very takes too much time. A little bit grow up there, but too long. The age 20s, then we go fast. Then anyway, we don't want to age that, just go every day, moment to moment. Then we have a lot of signs for ear,
Wrinkles.
Then white hairs. Last year and then here we can check maybe twice more than the white hair here. Sometimes I thought maybe I can dress a little color, but too short to color. When I go to India, they mock, what happened to you? You're really getting old. What? You have a lot of white hairs. Yeah. People doesn't hurt, People say, oh, you look older. This is something that we don't want to hurt. Here. 그래서 당가서 가서 믿어와 식당 가서 지금 내려올 때는 가서 소리다 누가 먹고 누가 왔어. 동안 시간도 또 먹고 쉬어야 돼.
So even though we're in the higher realms, as a human being, we still have a lot of all this kind of sufferings, right?
그래서 다 누가 못 쳐봐야 누가 다 되로 지르겠어.
So when we understand the suffering, that's the suffering, then we will want to be free from that.
다 되네지. 나도 남아있는 동안다. 아니 냐와도 이다 되는 동안 다 먹고 쉬어야 돼. 먹는 건가 들라고 먹고 쉬어.
So and then there's the general sufferings of the cycles, and then there's the particular sufferings of this each realm, like the hell beings, what kind of suffering they go through, the hungry ghosts, and then even the gods and demigods, they have those sufferings that they go through. So we think about all these sufferings and then want to be develop a thought wanting to be free from these sufferings.
Gods, demigods, then the hell suffering, just be people explain explain. We see the books, but we don't see that. Where's the gods, where's the demigods, where's holograms. We don't see, we don't recognize, but we just see the animal realms, or animals, how they're suffering. Right? Even some animals we keep, people can honor, they keep, that they're not free. What honor take, what honor give, they have to go there, they're not free. If without keeping the people outside, animals, birds, tigers, elephants, some other beings, they're always very scared. All the day they're suffering, they're going to run to eat something. Very cold, they are not heat, they are not air conditioned. Also, most of the animals who they live, wild animals, they die. Who eat the meats, they die. Malaysia is
and so all these the animals who strive or who thrive on other animals, like killing and eating other animals, when they grow old, they are not able to hunt, and then they die of starvation.
That's 100%.
Most of it's most likely for them. Same with the animals who depend on grass. So when they're young enough, they can walk around, they can look for grass. But when they're old and or sick and feeble, they cannot walk and they just sit there and die.
아니 대나시기 다 바닥으로 주로 버리는 거, 내 지워서 다도 가지. 또 말하게 동가, 아니 삼시시하게 세요하게 동가, 아니 자게 동가, 조게 동가, 다 동가 삼지만 제발했어.
And same with the insects, the birds, the flies, and so forth. So they all have all these sufferings, of hunger, and there's the suffering of not finding the food, and suffering of always being scared that someone will come and eat them, and so forth. So all these kind of sufferings all the time.
들리다 다 그냥 말아서 통 리디아 들렸다 누가만 더 왔어. 근데 누가 딱 누가 옆에 전세나 가서 거기서 도서 누가 좀 문제를 걸어 썸마당 들렸다 제 검색어.
And so there are these kind of sufferings that we can see, right? It's kind of very obvious, and so think about these sufferings. So there's this is sufferings, and then I don't want to experience this suffering because this suffering and so forth. So all this thinking is called analytical meditation.
아니 다 전주 선거 땅에 다들 단두질로 다 삼제 탐지가 쳐도 소소 다 왔다 봐 상제 공부 동도질로 다 코로나라 동안 나라나 동안에 예 코로나 팬도 치고 다니다 다나마 팬도 치고 니바다 또 휴게기거든 다 델리 토야기 쳐도 다 지금 내주셔서 야들 다 왔어 공대 다 상제 공부 도보도 사만로 그때는 다 내저 동안 너무 먹어봐 타외 공부해야 돼 코와들 타와 제공도 사게 다 썸스 지어들라 다 내주 검색어.
So you think about these sufferings, that you go through, and you love, we should not wanting to be free from. I'm not wanting to experience this suffering, and wanting to be free from them. So that thought is called renunciation. And so with that thought, just as I don't want to experience any of these sufferings, other beings are all same in not wanting to experience any kind of sufferings. And so I have to help them to be free from these sufferings. But right now, I don't have that power or the potential to do that. So only person who has is the Buddha. So in order to benefit all sentient beings to be free from their sufferings, I must achieve state of full enlightenment. For that reason, I'm going to meditate on renunciation and so forth. So you can think like that when you meditate.
근데다 다 아니 인생보다 타와드니는 쉬나 대생이 주자 와라서 타와드는 다 타와 토고 누사벨로 콜레타 타고 누사벨로 지마마 비켜와나 아니 다 내주세 제가 그래서.
And so that kind of wish, wanting to be free from cycle existence. So you have to strive to develop that thought. And so you meditate and you think about that and you develop and develop and develop. So and then eventually when you have that thought all the time, throughout day and night, and that's when you have really generated the renunciation. The genuine renunciation is generated when you have developed that thought 1 wanting to be free from cyclic existence throughout day and night.
텐들로도 다 깨는 말했어. 다 그게 진짜 가진 타고 진짜도 저도 성분은 다 깨내라고 그래서 없어.
So that thought cannot be generated just like that. You have to keep on meditating, keep on thinking on that. Why I have to be free? Why I have to be free? Because I don't want to experience this suffering, because I don't want to experience that suffering, and so forth. So you have to develop that thought, wanting to be free from cycles all the time.
그래서 다 그래. 다 타왔던 일로 가지. 단 코알라 전도 일로 코알라 자고 누구라고 썸니다. 줄때 아니 공제들 와. 코알라 자고 누구 코알라 타고 누구라고 썸니다. 이제 시바 땡게 되네. 시바 되듯이.
So now just think, I must free from cycles. I must free from cycles. And so just meditate for a minute on that thought. I must free from cycles.
하든지 다 말하는 것도 있고 맨날 뭐지 usually every day a little bit 2 minutes 3 minutes every 2 seconds just little by 근데 다 코발라 다 고도 삼별로 제발 가지 타고 다 동아 내다가 때 타고 뛰고 something 그래서
And so why I want to be free from cycles, is because then you have to think about all the reasons, because I don't want to go through all these sufferings. And so you meditate on those reasons again.
근데 지금 제와였나? 아니 제가 얘들아야 돼. 얘도 싸다. 이로도 될 때문에 그래서 봐.
So you analyze on the reason, analyze on that on that topic. So I don't want to, and I want to be free from cyclic existence, and because there's such and such suffering and so forth. So because you have thought about the reason, then your thought wanting to be free from cyclic existence becomes more strong, more stable.
근데 단초도 나도 간가라. 냠녀들 근데 소소지 보이나 보면 소소 가사지 와였나? 아니 되게 계좌시야다. 로다 누다 남제 때다. 차상하다네. 지 소소지 대 간가라 따와있나? 근데 소소지 가이죠. 마보지 소소 통과를 해서 가서 돼.
So otherwise, if you just say, I want to be free, then that thought not going to be very strong. But you say, I want to be free because I don't want to experience suffering. And then that thought, you have good reason to support that thought, so your thought becomes strong and more stable. And so just like, when you like somebody, like the boyfriend or girlfriend, when you have the attraction towards the other person, then you think about why you like that person. You like, oh, he looks so, she looks so beautiful, or he looks so handsome, or the way he speaks, the way she speaks, the way they treat the people, the way they handle the problems, and so forth. When you think of all these things, then your liking becomes really strong. So when you think about all those reasons, then your thought of liking that person becomes stronger and stronger. So at that time, when you were thinking about that, of course we don't see any of the faults in that person. Although there are so many, but we're not thinking, right? So we're thinking about only good things. So where the person speaks, where the person look, where the person do all these things, by seeing all these things, so you will become more and more likened to the person, that you don't want to be separated from that person even for a moment. So that's how we develop attachment, right? And so you choose somebody to be your boyfriend or your girlfriend by looking at all these qualities, right? You don't just say, oh, okay, I want this person to be my boyfriend or this person to be my girlfriend. Just like that, you choose that person because of all these different reasons, right? So person looks, how he or she looks, and the way the person speak and do the things and so forth. By depending on all these things, then you develop all this attachment towards that person, right? So that's an analytical meditation on attachment. So you're meditating at that time, in a bad, in a negative object, but you're meditating. You're thinking about that person more and more, to like that person, to be more and more attached to that person. So same with the anger. Like when we're angry with somebody, how do we develop that anger towards that person? And so the way the person look at you, the way the person speak, the way they, he shout or say something, so by all these things, and when you think about that more and more, he said that, he said in that tone, and so forth, and then you develop your anger becomes stronger and stronger.
He or she told me some this word, they hurt my mind, my feeling. Then he said, oh, why he did this, why he did this. Then he showed me something, the action, said something, many people's friends,
in front of many people.
Or in front of many people. Then you give them many reasons to angry with them, then you are more strong, angry. Then you cannot, that's what the demo was.
Understand.
Right? Control developed in the was.
So that's how you develop anger, right?
Yeah. Kungal Mavishason, Kungal Matama Cheson, and Kungal Masa Piso, Telecola Samatani, and Kurumama Sando, dead on the door.
And so it's just because he, he lied to me, or he was dishonest to me, or he embarrassed me in front of many people. And by thinking of all these reasons, then you develop more and more anger towards that person.
What did you know? I think so you know you want to know something about it. They catch you the data in the command the Maramachi. Can't you come to losing the idea?
So in reality, of course, there are so many faults from our side, right? We have so many mistakes, we make many mistakes, but we don't think about that. We only think about that person. I was right. That person did this and that, and then so forth. And then because of that, and then you get more and more angry towards that person.
What the region? Tan COVID Dunga. Tan Kotani Lokiman. COVID Dunga, some native COVID Dunga.
So you won't be able to develop that thought just like that. That thought wanted to be free from psychoactin just like that. And so you have to think about all these reasons why you want to be free. You keep on thinking about these reasons, and then your thought wanting to be free from psychoactin becomes stronger and stronger.
Whatever.
And so, for example, a prisoner who doesn't want to be in a prison, right? I mean, most prisoners don't want to be in a prison. They always want to be free from prison. Right? They always have that thought throughout day and night. How can I be free from here? How can I be free from here? So the reason why he wants to be free from that is because there are a lot of sufferings inside in the prison, right? He doesn't want to experience all those suffering, the troubles. So that's why he wants to be free from prison. So for example, people in Tibet, some people like, I don't know, maybe about 21 people have already, burned themselves, right? The self-immolation. And so the reason why they do that is because they are not so happy and they're suffering in the place where they are. They don't have the freedoms and so forth. So because they don't want to go through those sufferings, therefore they, burn themselves. So sometimes, of course, people they are not mentally stable, so they just set themselves on fire.
Also jump the very high buildings, jump the waters. But today that can you de dunga de Moshiva in the Dunga Tandi Logic, Dunga to Yabo, some tango there.
So anyway, if you understand the suffering, then you will have the wish or the thought wanting to be free from that suffering.
Okay? Yeah.
So I asked Geshe what his view is on the self-immolations, as far as a Buddhist.
Tate Shushona Shena Susan Yamle Battery, but that causes to bother never is. Tati Yam Shishama, and she had the number of movers. And I'm missing there's a Shirashiamis. Yes, I don't know how you say. Difficult to explain. There are many different reasons also. You know, Shochina Chinata, I'm going to the Tamani, the Messiah to the Duchile as we do. And that was a June lady. Tamara, the same
So in one way, it's a very courageous thing to do, because they're not doing for themselves. They're doing in order for all these 6 million Tibetans, to have freedom, to be able to have freedom of their own country and so forth. So in one way, it's a very courageous thing to do. And so in other way, like instead of just ending your life in that way, you could do much better, maybe with your life and benefit so many people in other ways, so that could be better, not commit this self-immolation. So recently there was one nun who was only 18 years old, who burned herself, and she's in the paper it said that she was really well educated and she could have become a doctor and so forth. So it's a great loss. If she had lived, maybe she could have benefited more. But on the other hand, because they did that, for the benefit of others, it's an impressive thing to do also.
Okay.
Okay, so I have another question. So is this self-immolation, is this part of Buddhism? It has a history in Buddhism, or is this something that maybe had heard about in other places, parts of the world, and adapted it for their situation? Or where does it come from?
Well, I wouldn't say that self-immolation is the practice of Buddhism. But if you do it for the benefit of others, if they see there's benefit in others, and then they can do like the great bodhisattvas. They give their body to the animals. They help in that way. So it's in a similar way. It's like that. In that way, yes, you can say it's a good thing, but no, of course, it's not practice. So yeah, you can just confirm that it is not practice of Buddhism to do the self-immolation.
But historically, did it happen in Tibet before this, before the past couple of years? In the history of Tibet?
No, maybe not.
Because in Southeast Asia they did before,
Vietnam.
Vietnam, yeah.
I never heard this before Tibetan.
I see.
Yeah, but this is not Tibetan practice. We cannot call it. No,
Yeah, so they just kind of adapted from other people, where they were protesting in similar way, to end war or to end, what is controlling.
장에 나라땅에서 아주 추측이 들라고 말했고. 그래서 나 동아대 조금은 다 동아대 영화에 다 시에 가서 소소치 어떻게 되죠? 무슨 게 추측이 그들라고 말했어.
더더 저 동화 과서다 동화선다 수서 동화마다
다 배미쳐서 가게된 영화도 같이 아니 그냥 살리 지금 너무 추측이 들라고 말했어. 생각도 주로 어느 것처럼.
So that is not practicing dharma. It's not practicing dharma. And I mean, of course, they are protesting on behalf of all these people, but they say, I cannot stand anymore. These sufferings that they are giving on the Tibetan people, and so to end this, I'm going to burn myself in protesting in that way. And so it could be like that. I wouldn't say that it is dharma practice.
number children zero. Maybe another children. So seven so that can now channel kanji.
So seven.
Seven. Then Yamana chew the whole lot.
Okay. So then it may become similar to the other kind of religion or other teachings where they say if you kill yourself you'll be born as that same being and so forth. So anyway, yeah, that's not Buddhist practice.
Okay.
So anyway, so what they did is a very courageous thing to do, and we should all pray for their thoughts, their wishes to come true. And so by thinking of all these sufferings, then developing that wish, wanting to be free from this suffering or cycle existence, and now that you have found that thought, wanting to be free from this cycle existence, and so you put your mind on that thought for as long as possible, and then keep on doing this every day on a daily basis, and until you develop this thought fully throughout day and night. So this is the time to do it. So Chandrakirti in the treatise on the middle way, he said that it is the time now. Now it is the time. The time is now because now we are born as human beings. We have that potential to do the practice. If we don't do it now and instead fall into the lower realm, and then again now all over again, then we have to create a cause and condition for us to be born as human beings, and then start all over again. That will take way too long. So the right time is to do it now. So the reason why we have to do right now at this time when we are born as human beings is because we have all these favorable conditions, the potential and so forth to do that practice. So it's just that we are not using our mind or brain, but otherwise we can put whatever we want in it, right? We can learn anything that we want to, right? So like I mentioned before, that there's so much amazing things in the science, the technologies, right? All these things are developed by who? It's people, right? We people created it. So this technology of this video, right? You can speak to it, you can see the picture, and you can create so much space that it can hold so many data and pictures and videos and so forth, and you can take anywhere and show it anywhere and so forth. So all this amazing thing is created by who? People, right? Human beings. It's created by people, right? People created it. You know? It's not just something that came just like that from the ground, right? And then say, okay, use it. No, it's not like that, right? So people created it. That's how, you know, the power for the brain of the human being is.
And the Sanjay Kompa, Tawa Trimchiwa Kompa said you the music together was.
And then same with the achievement, you know, of liberation from psychism or the highest enlightenment, Buddhahood. That's also, you know, is achieved by human beings.
And the music gave a lady, Tito and Yamne Chene, and you can
And so someone is born as a human being and they engage in the practice, and then by developing, you know, these realizations in higher and higher, then eventually become a fully enlightened being.
Bella, me mind better than Lada Lama in Yuri. Lada Konachi said that they were turned into the cherry or they were in.
So in the upper realm, higher realm, you know, we have the human beings and the demigods and gods. You know. And so the gods and demigods are much happier than the human beings. And so they are always distracted by these happinesses that they don't think about other sufferings.
And that Tunrona, Geshe was.
Then of course the animals, you know, have no ways to do it, they are too ignorant.
And then
the hungry ghosts and the hell beings, you know, they have no way to do the practice there because they are so much intense with the sufferings. And so therefore, you know, the best condition, you know, is that of human being, right? So that's the reason why, you know, Chandrakirti said this is the time. And then also, you know, Shantideva said in this, right, at the beginning of the day 7, it says you can free yourself from the great river of suffering by relying on the board of human river. Such a board will be hard to get again, or blind one. This time, do not fall asleep. So now you understand the way to meditate on renunciation, right? How to meditate on renunciation. So you think about the sufferings and then develop that strong wish wanting to be free from those sufferings. And that when you have developed that wish, that thought, then hold on to that thought for as long as possible. That's meditating on renunciation. So check into your own mind for now. Right now, check into your own mind. What is your mind thinking? What is it thinking? Is it thinking about, you know, what are you going to do tomorrow, or, you know, is it thinking about what are you going to eat, you know, what are you going to wear, and so forth? Where is your mind? Think about it. You know, check your mind where it is.
It's a thinking moment. Plan to tonight, go to party. Anyway,
And so always check your mind also. You know, see what your mind is thinking, where it is going.
More propitious time that you advise for the nature. Is there a more propitious time for the nature of the time that he feels that would be? Oh, sorry. I'm interested for myself. The nature, technology. Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm interested in the appreciation of the monk about the nature of the propitious time, by the nature that life is extremely demanding and busy. The morning other night would be more appropriate for me to be very thorough about this practice. And I would like if you can give me feedback.
시당다 무소소소라 소소치 감도 못 만나면 레스. 근데 아주 나베 신시나 이 쇼게 나오데. 근데 나디야 나와요. 나 아니를 봤다마다 심사에 그래서 본다이다 또 니만인가 내가 가래 가서 저들 나베나 소소소 딱 감도 못 만나요.
So, I mean, of course, it depends on individuals, which is the better time for them. But generally, in Buddhism, it says that you have to. The morning is the best part. The early in the morning is the best part. Your mind is more fresh. Your body is more, rested. So therefore, you are able to think better in the morning. In the night, it's hard because you have been working all day and think you're doing so many things. So much going on in your mind, your body is tired, and so it's hard to do the practice. So best is in the morning.
But if you are not person, maybe no problem. Right? That person means they feel very late. I think maybe you most not person. Usually the people here, they feel very late, get up very late, right? Most people, right? Most especially the younger generation. They stay night maybe 2-3 hours, 2 hours more than they sleep. Then get up, if they're not school, no work, then maybe they're 1 o'clock. Anyway, this is not so because you come to Mumbai,
So generally, morning is the best, but you can see which time of the day is better for you.
Okay. Okay. 다들 다가도 가능한 말로기 다 이만 든바 가능한 것들 쉬셔야 봐서.
And so now we're going to start from the day 7. We went through that already a little bit, right, at the last time.
다 람지사와 신이 때문에 살아서 저와 담발은 지다 되면 봐. 람지사와 신이 때문에 때문에 지다 되면 봐. 신이 때문에 제발 별로 좀 요즘에 제발 좀 맞죠. 이제 신이 때문에 자체 취재 그거 예스.
She has got.
That's one of the best things about the lotion. Just lotion. The Malone, Thomas in it, David Green, the Martin, Yemi in England. The Masters, there are Thomas in it with the Lasha, David Green, whatever the developing Yemi. Somebody that you get as a loss. They hang in the baby. Yeah, the Timmy Payanda, Matemi, you move some gushing, say you.
So let's maybe all read together, since most of us will have that book, right? We have the text with you. So it's in day 7. After that heading, where it says after discussing the headings already covered, Pabongka Rinpoche continued, right? After that, so let's read that paragraph, that ends the following paragraph altogether. The 4 major headings, the sequence in which the disciples are to path and instruction as 2 substance. The root of the path, devotion to a spiritual guide, and the backward graduate training and undertake of the Buddha. I will now discuss how to grow yourself to a spiritual guide. I could not cover the materials of the preparatory rites 4 times over. But one must do this when teaching the main part of this course. Starting from the section of devotion to the spiritual guide. This includes a summary and starts from the basic section. From now on, we should follow the sections.
Okay. 다시 다 지금 다 내 소리 내가 문이 지나 지금 나가고 있어. 얼마 사실은 좀 자산 자치 지지. 담보 제고 되네요. 됐대봐. 됐다네.
So like you said, according to the materials of the preparatory rites 4 times over. So usually there is a tradition, because the teaching is much longer time, therefore they have time to cover through all these materials.
다 인바이나 다 나도 시작해야 시작하시. 대한 직대 나스 다 내신이데 신이사도 강제 소소라 아니 너셜랑도 실적으로 같은 게 개개들하고 그래서
So the spiritual guide, the spiritual guide is someone who show you the path to have, show you what is to be abandoned and what is to be cultivated at this time and in the future. So what is the proper thing to do and what is not to do and so forth. So someone who show you or teach you is the spiritual guide.
배는 지때나다 신소당 도소당 이게 트야다 로야당 감바서 가리 제거는 것도 다 남기를 딱 건도 왔어. 남기를 왜 용만도 왔어.
Generally, whatever kind of things you are involved in, like carpentry or sculpture or even to read and write and so forth. So all these, for all these things, you have to depend on a teacher, right? Someone to teach you how to do these things.
남기면 시행하도 시행들이 여러 가지.
So is it possible to know without having someone to teach you?
여러 가지. 나도 코로 쓰지라마.
What about getting angry? Nobody had to teach you.
내가 자신해.
Attachment.
이 라이트 땅에 지금 대다 얘기했어. 다 지금 그래. 더 가봐지더라고 말이야. 랑이 말이죠.
Yeah, of course, not everything, but yeah, how to read, how to write, how to do many things, we need to have somebody to teach us, right?
다 빼다 대리에서 다 세대가 샤와 지금 감바들고 다 트럭 땡긴다 막 대화도 상제사도 시발라 신이 거기 지금 땅에 보고 그랬어.
So even for the things in this life, like how to do a carpenter, how to build a house, and so forth, you need somebody to show you how to do it, right? And for the everlasting happiness of full enlightenment, of course, you need somebody to show you that.
근데 가시가 너무 고고 말해 수수 빼졌다는 시기에서 대초 말해서 너무 들리는 거 땡고 그래서 왔어.
And some they say you don't need a teacher, you can just learn all these things by reading yourself, reading the scriptures by yourself. But then according to the teachings, that's not possible. You still need, even though you know how to read and so forth, but you still need a teacher to explain to you.
냠내서야 되지. 담마 진이치대 줘봐. 자꾸 지나고시 거기서 그래서.
And especially the practice that you do, you need to have the blessing of these gurus that follow from one another.
그냥 나도 샤라니고 사진다고 해나. 류연은 데봐도 류매는 데봐도 류연은 데봐도 괜찮아서 왔어.
So, for example, if you recite a Heart Sutra, you recite Heart Sutra without the transmission, and you're reciting Heart Sutra with the transmission. So it's much more meritorious if you recite with the transmission.
어떤 좀 말이나. 그러나 다 배우면서 왔다 배나 내내 작아든 거 와야지. 아니 다 상계지 한번 틀리고 그래서 대학 강화주 주는 거 말해서 나만 돈이만 양문 차송 있는 루싱이지가 아니 제대로 그래서 봐.
And so here it says, right, suppose you were going to India, for example, you would definitely need to find a guide, and not just anyone would do. You must depend on someone who has been there before, similarly. Okay, so this is again an example that in ancient time, when someone is going from Tibet to India, you can't just go. You have to depend on the people who can show you the path. You are walking all the way there, and so you have to know the path. If you don't know that, then you will be lost and so forth. So you will never get there. So you need somebody, who can show you the path, the way to India.
But now we can take the map with us. We can go here, right? But also we take plane, or car, or GPS. GPS take for us every. But in the 등에대 다 대대와 등에대 말에는 막대기 치료 그래. GPS 치료 그래 was.
So, but still, it's something there to take you to the right destination, right? Without that thing, you will not be able to go there by yourself, on your own.
대양 다 map 정도 map 야보이면은 로싱 말고 와서 맵 필요로 해라.
So even if you have a map, you need it more current, more accurate one. If you don't have that map, if you have the map that is not accurate, then you might get lost. Right?
Maybe you have to select outside on the maybe today, then that you don't know where's place to stay. Then you are very no good map. But then 다 내가 남가 땡에 걔네 대학가 가지고 만지고 그렇게 말했을 때 소소라 냠냠다 시세다 차서 이게 고르송을 해서
And it says similarly, a spiritual guide must be a person capable of taking you on the path to Buddhahood. So you can't just have anybody to be your spiritual guide. Someone who have experience of these practices and who can show you the right method and the right way to do the practice and so forth.
이제 남가 트니가 게게 코로나 뭐 시기 명이지나 딱 맛이 왔는데 그 노조대잖아 딱 그런 거 때문에 인베에서 고로잖아 그거 넣어서 그러.
So if the teacher is teaching the path, the Dharma, if he or she doesn't know all of it and doesn't know all this correctly, then he might or she might teach in the wrong way. And then the students who learn will be learning the wrong thing also.
Everybody wrong teacher wrong things, then everybody go wrong way. But today, yet the dos of Kanjulam, then and Lam Chataba Mishi, Loban, Lam Loban, Redra. There is too much in it that Kachi, Jirimbochi, Lam Chitava. That's just one Redra.
And so they says if you depend on anyone at all, on a bad company and the like, you will not be led on the right path and may go astray.
What is that Jirimbochi? Yet she may know. Yet the Fiji Lam Chitava Rose, Lam Chitava from a rest.
So thus it is vital to depend on a spiritual guide at the outset. And a note or two is Jirimbochi and so what is spiritual says the spiritual guide is the root of the path. And so this teacher, the root of the path, what the root of the path is the teacher who show you the correct path to liberation or enlightenment.
And they might see each other, Laptatina, Lutu, Yapu, Yodemin, so get out to you.
And in general also, at that school, whether the students are good or not depends a lot on the teacher. Right? So the reason the school is good is because they're a school teacher. Right? So the student is very good in their school because they're a good teacher there.
That's shocking that student.
Of course, it depends on the student as well. The students have to work hard, not just the teacher. Not just good enough for the teacher to be good, but the student has to work hard also. If the student is lazy like me, then of course it will be difficult, no matter how good the teacher is.
Since when I took English class, and then the teacher did homework. I didn't do. When I come back, just I put book there. I do some other things. Tomorrow I'll go just pick up, then I'll go to the line. We call. People sit next to me, I check when you do homework. I just copy. Therefore, my English is still very low level. This is the depends. One such teacher, the one such depends on your effort. Therefore, also here they mention the teacher is very good and the students are also very good. They together they work. They're very easy to get enlightenment. They are very good and they can explain. Because teacher they explain very good teacher things. The students study meditation exactly what they say. Then of course they all cause conditions together. The results come in there. But then one missing that doesn't come. For example, we put the seed or apple or backyard. We put seed there, and we didn't put some other things, then seed never grow up. The seed there, but never will go.
So it will never grow.
What is that? 솔직히 신이 때 또 어디들이 계정만 같은 데서 남지 자와를 다 자와 매들의 손을 해서 다 경해야 돼.
So therefore, the spiritual guide, the teacher, is the root of the path.
어떤데 개개에 대한 지금 미 전부도 깨도 치고 이거 배는 말이 가지 맛이 몇잔하라요 그래. 아니 지금 남주 깨도 명예되나 이거 가지 소수로 배도 경해서지. 다 소수로 따고 그래.
So this kind of a spiritual guide, who is the root of the path, is not necessarily someone who is famous, who is well known. Can be someone who is not famous. Could be someone who is a lay person. and someone who could be very quiet and so forth. So there could be a spiritual guide in any kind of situations.
아니, 다 얼마 되려도 다시 시작은 되면서 배도 얘가도 와다치 도루도 보고 그냥에 아니 tum도 보고 대냥에 근데 다 대상 도도는 뭐는 무슨 왔으면 가게 휴일에 차는 주말 도서 근데 다 놀러와 가요 제가 그래서.
So there has been in the past, and it could happen also again, that so many people, they claim themselves to be such and such teacher, and they wear all these garments, very heavenly garments, and then they sit in a very high tone, but then of course they don't have the knowledge, and then they all teach wrong things, and they say the wrong things, and they ruin their reputation.
어떻게다 수수 가디게 봐야 되지. 그 수수 대학 개개인데 다 야부지 제가 계시면 지나야 되죠. 뭐 나와시.
So also it is important. Therefore, it is important that we search or look for a spiritual, a good spiritual guide.
아니 배회가 자와도 배회가 라마도 계시던 캠보이나 그거 다 야부지 어떻게 해요 말이죠.
So if it is a Tibetan monk or lama or geshe, it's not necessary that they are good. Just because they are monk or geshe, it doesn't mean they are good.
삼성화도 지지되는 것보다 배회 지르는 것보다 휴일에 근데 지지가 다 자와도 안 되는 것다 그샤야만 가지고 있었는데 좀 놀아요.
So some people they think that if it is a Tibetan geshe, then it's very good. But if it is a Western monk or nun, then not very good. So it's, again, that's not a valid reason. That's not necessarily like that.
For example, I have one story, maybe Getty heard all this told us to one, I think Europe, some Western guy, he found some lama, Tibetan lama. Then that one Tibetan lama he never read so.
So this European guy, he relied on a Tibetan monk, a lama, as his teacher.
After a little bit longer, then he took his wife.
So this monk, then, well, he had affair with his, monk had affair with this guy's wife. So she went with the monk. And so this man later, met with His Holiness, and then he told, His Holiness that he feels disgusting, thinking about this Buddhism. So it is not the Buddhism, right? That's bad. He found, he looked for a wrong teacher. He found the wrong teacher. So it is important. Therefore, it is important to look for a correct, a good, spiritual teacher. So in our case here, we're just talking. We're discussing, just like a discussion here. So we don't have like a teacher-disciples relationship here, but just like a friends, right? We're discussing. And so, anyway, so when you listen to the teachings, being taught by somebody, then you have to check about that person. What he teaches, where he teaches, and how is he in general, and so forth. So you should check about that person, and then make the decision whether to see that person as your spiritual guide or not. Then once you have made the decision to take that person as your spiritual guide, then you should never ever develop any wrong faith or lose faith in him or her. So that's also like in the story of Lama Tsongkhapa, how Geshe Rinpoche, one of Lama Tsongkhapa's closest disciple, sitting on his right, Geshe Rinpoche is the the successor of Lama Tsongkhapa, later became the successor of Lama Tsongkhapa. And so when he was from different tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, so when he heard a very high name about Lama Tsongkhapa, he just went to see how he really is. And then when he went to listen to the teaching and Lama Tsongkhapa was giving in the public, he didn't want to sit lower than Lama Tsongkhapa. He sat on the same throne as Lama Tsongkhapa, just to kind of like a proud, being proud. He says, I don't want to be lower than him. So he sat on the same level, on the same throne. And then as he was listening listening to Lama Tsongkhapa, then he found that Lama Tsongkhapa is really a highly realized being and has a lot of knowledge. So then he's slowly he stepped down on the floor, and then sat down, and then started to listen, and then later became his disciple.
What is it? Today, that kind of
and so anyway, it is important to check the person.
It's 30 times. Oh, yeah.
The challenge.
Oh, sorry. What it is, that's handing out of that. Nishine and ta shoma this demi pay in the session important to yes. So shona to say not on the one
So it is important to check about the teacher, and then also in this text it explains why it is important and so forth, and then the benefits and the advantages of relying on a teacher. Why you should rely, and what benefits are there if you rely, and then what benefits, what disadvantages are there if you don't rely, and so forth. So we'll discuss more on this next time. And in the meantime, if you have the time, just to read through this on your own, and then it will become more clear as we discuss.
There are such a jailers, such a jail rules on the data home of this.
So there are the opinion get up. So there are 8 advantages of relying on a spiritual teacher. So that's going to be your homework for the next week. Memorize that. What are the 8 advantages of relying on a spiritual teacher?
Okay. Any other questions?
Not a question.
Question 22. Short question. Oh, you all know? Okay, go ahead.
This is new for me. So the poem of "You can free yourself from the great river of suffering by relying on the boat of human birth." So the human birth of the challenge for me, the Buddhism, is the nature of the suffering. We speak a lot about the suffering, and so here we are in this boat of a body with a consciousness that is apart from the body. So the motivation that the essence of your teaching today for me is about motivation of the river, of the boat, how to come into the clear light. You open a space, it's a space of a clear light, the boat of the body, so that you don't renounce that which you are as this time in time of your body with your heart and all the relatives you were given, whoever they are, we don't know. So if the whole of humanity is a river of our relatives, including the creatures, how to separate yourself from the nature of this. You talk a lot about suffering, but there must be joy in the life. There must be a lot of joy. I have to believe that there is a freedom within the moment. Otherwise I could never be here. It's not possible. I would be dead by now. I know it in my heart because I see so much cruelty in my life. So that freedom, or that space of the clear light and this body that we created, I suppose, because you say everything is mine. So I'm paying attention to the motivation of shifting a knowledge that you give us, yet at the same time to be free without preconceived ideas about Buddhism. That's very important to me, to have freedom of my thoughts, but not in an unreliable river. I like this poem, I really do. Don't fall asleep. I like that. Thank you.
So is that a question or opinion?
Yes, the motivation of the freedom.
The motivation of the freedom of suffering without having to rely constantly. Yeah, it's a question.
좋아했어. 뭐라고 생각하면서 약간 동화 줄 것이다. 동화 주고 스무스다. 동화도 들어간 동화 주고 매번 만드시기 대화 매번 시도 대화 여러 번 대화 매는 맞아 가르스 데토레스 동화 주고 말아.
It's okay, you don't answer.
대화 열어서 이나요. 나도 대화 때 보면 왔어. 애들 나도 동화 마셔 그랬어.
Yeah, of course we have some enjoyments, the happinesses, but the happiness that we have is not stable. It doesn't stay as a happiness all the time.
나 대리기 원하는 무슨 얘기죠? 말로 해도 너무 처음에 자는 거야. 그래서 사실 공부 좋아하는 다 때는 대화 이런 얘기죠.
So if we, when we experience some kind of happinesses, that happiness doesn't last for a long time. Even if we feel happy in the morning, in the evening, it's no longer happiness. If it's happy today, it's no longer happiness tomorrow, and so forth. So our happiness, is changing all the time, and so therefore it's not really happiness, but we say somehow it's a happiness. And so the real happiness is only in the liberation or enlightenment. So that's why we have to strive to achieve that. And so our happiness is the samsaric happiness, some happiness in samsara, and it has no essence. So in order to achieve that happiness with the essence, then we have to free ourselves from all these sufferings. And therefore we talk about the suffering in order to develop that thought, wanting to be free from these sufferings. So without thinking about the suffering, we will not have that thought, wanting to be free from those sufferings.
Thank you. Geshe, quick question. The story about the European gentleman, Western guy, who had his wife stolen from the Lama, is there a karmic connection? Is there a karmic reason of why? What brought these two people together? Would you explain it as kind of karmic? Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we go into negative things happen to us, and a lot of times it's from past and negative, karmic seeds that have generated at that particular time.
Yeah, definitely they have created some karma together in the past. And there must be some karmic relationship in the past. Of course, exactly we don't know what it is. It could be that this German, the European guy stole his wife before, and now his wife is stolen. So it could be like that, but we don't know exactly what kind of karma brought them to her. But yes, definitely there has to be some relationship of the karma that they have created now.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I just have two short questions about Guru devotion. It says a little later in this chapter that when we see faults in the Guru, there's nothing that we can really rely on our own view. That's what we should contemplate on, is when we see faults in our teachers, that we should reflect that there's nothing really to trust in our own view, because the faults that we see could just be our own delusions. So that makes me wonder, how do we even know if we found the right teacher if there's nothing to trust in our own view?
the jelly was and then was that Shinny didn't have nothing, Shinny Maras, John Tumba in that, and Shinny Maras and Narangit and Nautilus, and then some was. But there is also some that's what cuts of the way, and then Shinny Momadic and the self told us. That's also the Nautilus, from Nora Sandira, and then Pazada or Shinny, the Abu Mindu, then was a Tizora. That's a job. That's a good job. That's also the job. That's also not so the Dutch job. She's the Dutchess in us. And so now so Dutch doing it, so now they are not doing it. Something was.
I'm going to get him at the Himalaya. And quality to the double. Okay, I can say, she only answered them to the temple. Can't cut to the double. And they can't hear the Susola Penna. And that's also going to check. Remember, gave the Pachi, young remember as well.
The cross and the pember and the other Corona penguin and the cash. Then I announced the pember, but Corona penguin and the cash. Then some cigar. Then a cigar. Cocosia did it. To judge love and Otang again to some other ladder. Cotang again somebody. And then call it into somewhere, some cigar. And then somewhere, or then Koran cameras and gain out of the rest. Some
Trichona, the Gitensovena, or that thing in undivided, not a pet or a turkey chicken muscle, to buy Yawapa Kajus. Condors with personals who's good one. Can she get a Suzuchi? Not to John Tavana, can you Suzuchi, Norney, the Gig Condors, not to take what you wind up. Can you Susan the other Tashi? The person was for.
So when you're looking for a spiritual guide, at that time, of course, you have to rely on what you think. And then not only what you think, but also you check with other people. So it's not only your perception, it's other people's also commenting on that. Oh yeah, he's a great teacher, he did this and that, and he taught about this, he knows it. He has this knowledge, he has that knowledge, and you hear from other people. And also you see. So when you see that, then you take that person as your teacher. But then once you have taken that person as your teacher, then after that, whatever negatives you see in him, then then that's for your own mind. And you should not see, even if he has a real negative, you should not still lose any faith in him. And so then if you think that, oh, this is my perception, which in case is really true also, it is your perception. Your own view that you see it, but it's not really necessary that it's there. So if you think like that, that helps your mind to not have that negative thought towards the teacher.
Some
And so sometimes, so if the teacher scolds you, says, "Oh, he's a bad person," you might think, and then you have to think that, the teacher is scolding me, in order to help me, because there are so many different ways of, helping the person or taming the person. So sometimes you speak nicely, and that person will be tamed. And sometimes you have to be a little harsh, to tame the person. So, it is just you should, at that time you should think that, oh, the teacher is showing that aspect to help me. So that's why the Buddhas they come in a wrathful form, like the protectors, with bulging eyes, like fiery hairs and so forth. So that is to show that aspect, because that is the way that they can tame or benefit us. And some can be benefited or tamed just by being very nice and patting on their head and so forth. So there are many different ways.
Okay.
Well, the only reason why I ask is because I've made so many mistakes before, and the thought that we can never turn back once we've relied on somebody as a teacher, that thought kind of is a little scary to me, because then the fear comes up of, what if I chose the wrong teacher? Even though by lineage the teacher is pure, even though I see all these qualities, there's still that thought of, what if I chose the wrong teacher? Because just when I read that we can never turn back, it's a little scary to me, because I've made mistakes before.
So we'll discuss more on that later as we go on this chapter,
Okay.
on this section. We'll have more and more information, so yeah, you might be more enlightened by that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Geshe.
Okay, then maybe stop. Okay, thank you everybody. Then please, if you have 10, remember there are more than 4.
8 benefits. Memorize the 8 benefits. By the advantages.
Then also, everybody to learn how you chanting.
Chanting master.
Chanting master.
Oh, chanting.
Oh. Everybody just learn the chanting master. This is also our knowledge. Also, this is for our knowledge. Everybody should learn, how you chanting.
Learn to be the chanting leader.
Chanting leader. This is our work on the social also.
Yeah, so that's also something that you should know.
Lojo.
Knowledge.
Tibetan Lojo. Right. Okay, thank you everybody.
Okay, page 39, we'll do the prayers of that page and continue on. Maybe take Tibetan first prayer. Mandala.